What is up, guys? Man here with another episode of Modern Meta Breakdown. And this time we're going to be going back to a tried and true classic Modern deck, Jund. So if you were familiar with Modern, you should be familiar with this list, or at least this deck. It's done some changing and adjusting over the years, and that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about. As I have three lists to show you guys today. They're all super close and super similar, but we're going to talk mainly about the flex spots that are available in these lists. We're also going to talk a little bit about what makes a Jund deck so powerful and able to survive in very particular metas, because you'll notice that there are certain periods of time where Jund doesn't really exist in Modern. It's one of those that pops up every now and again based on how things are going in the Modern meta. So let's talk a little bit about the power of the deck itself. I've got Tarmogoyf thrown up here first because he's kind of the poster boy of Jund when you think about it, right? He's 2 cost, and you're like, oh, he's an 0-1 to start with, but it's very easy for him to be sitting there at like a 4 or 5 on average. So 2 cost, 4 or 5 creature, that's still pretty good. That's still pretty powerful. Really, he gets powerful off of the back of the spells that this list runs, being able to strip away cards from your opponent's hand, being able to destroy a bunch of stuff, and that's kind of the way that this deck is designed. It's disruption, removal, grind it out until I can stick a creature and kill you off through this attrition war. Tarmogoyf is a great example of that, of playing this attrition war, of being able to grind that way. This is a newest edition. If you're familiar with our newest set that is going on, this adventuring murderous rider zombie knight over here. So he's got an instant ability on him that you can destroy target creature or planeswalker, you lose 2 life, and then you get to exile this card. Then you can cast it from exile, and it is a 2/3 lifelink creature. When it dies, you get to put it on the bottom of its owner's library. So having removal with an upside is pretty nice. The deck is just kind of full of removal, but being able to also have a threat later when it gets to that grindy stage and having that ability to gain life is super relevant in this sort of list. So some of the other creatures that this list run are Scavenging Ooze, another way to gain life, also a way to kind of target graveyard strategies. If you guys have seen, there are of course Jund lists running around, Sword of Meat combo, Urza decks that are running around, so there are cards that are still using the graveyard. Even the control list, right? You can be able to pick and choose what cards that are in their graveyard, so you can adjust their Snapcaster plays. Also, Tireless Tracker in here. It's got a pretty good upside against those grindy matchups of whenever you get a land to enter the battlefield, you get a clue. You can sack a clue, draw a card, and put a +1 counter on Tireless Tracker. So, seems pretty good in that regard. Scavenging Ooze and Tireless Tracker here are adjustable creature bases, number-wise. Murderous Rider's a new one. Some people are running that in their list. It's up in the air. We'll see how the meta develops, if that is still where it needs to go. Tireless Tracker ties in very nicely with our newest Planeswalker to the list, which we'll be talking about in a second. Scavenging Ooze is one of those based on meta again. It's either main board or sideboard. I don't think it's something that you can cut from your 75 as Jund, but depending on how the meta is shaping up, you have to decide where you want it to be. But let's talk first about our newest Planeswalker, Ren N6, and why does Tireless Tracker love him so much? So, 2-cost Planeswalker. So we talk about 3-cost Planeswalkers a lot, right? Liliana, is kind of the staple of Jund when we think about 3-cost Planeswalkers, but now they've got a 2-cost Planeswalker. So really what you want to be doing as Jund is having a turn 1 Inquisition Thoughtseize, strip away, and be able to kind of follow it up from there. Usually we'd be like, okay, I'll play Dark Confidant or something. Now we don't really need to because we've got Ren and 6. +1, -1, and -7 ability, 3 cost or 2 costs with 3 loyalty. The +1, you get to return a land from your graveyard to your hand. So if you are playing your fetches, you can be able to do that. Also ties in well with Tireless Tracker of, hey, you can play a land, get another clue. So works nicely. The -1, deal 1 damage to any target. A lot of creatures early on in the game that people are dropping down on those first couple turns might be those 1/1 creatures, or at least creatures with 1 toughness. So having that ability to kind of ding something off is pretty relevant. And then of course we've got our Liliana of the Veil that is thrown into the mix. Everyone should be familiar with her. +1, each player discards a card. So again, if you've got Renin 6 and you have Lily, you can discard your lands, get them back, and be able to keep your important cards in your hand while you're discarding away a bunch of lands. -2, you get to Edict and make target player sack a creature. And then -6, you separate all your permanents out and do all that kind of fun stuff. I don't spend as much time talking about the minus abilities, the ultimates, if you will, of the Planeswalkers, because it's not as often that you see that happening, but it is kind of relevant. Just like Renin 6 being able to have retrace on all of your instants and sorceries is pretty good. But let's talk about the spells. I've been talking about it in kind of 2 categories, disruption and removal. So we've got Thoughtseize as in here, Inquisition is in here, here's our disruption, and then we've got our removal. Assassin's Trophy, which, you know, is kind of the tried and true, being able to kill off anything, doesn't have a limit on the converted mana cost, has been kind of the upside. We don't really need to worry about them getting a land. That's not as relevant. So Fatal Push is in here, and then Lightning Bolt, of course. Now, these next 2 cards that I'm going to be talking about are the meta-dependent flex spells that Jund runs. Kolaghan's Command and Maelstrom Pulse. These are definitely in response to the rise up of the Urza list. Being able to destroy an artifact is relevant. Kolaghan's Command added in there, having that extra ability to make someone discard, being able to deal 2 damage to somebody, you know, all of that is just kind of upside. And in the off chance it gets super grindy, you can return a creature from your graveyard to your hand. So Kolaghan's Command, great, get 2 modes. That's why we're seeing 2 in the main board now, is based on how the meta. Maelstrom Pulse, same kind of thing. If your opponent is going wide, making a bunch of creatures, making a bunch of tokens, get rid of them all at once. Seems really good. The other one, of course, we've got a lot of flexibility with our sideboard and how things are working. It's a very much meta dependent on how things are going, but you do want kind of that mix, right, on how things are. Graveyard hate, artifact hate, more removal, things like that. So artifact hate, our collectors in here. We've got some land destructions because Jund has a very hard time against, say, a Tron list, because we're both trying to grind, go a little bit longer, but your bombs and the things that you're landing are much more powerful than me throwing down a Tarmogoyf. All right, you being able to play a Karn or an Ugin, that's much scarier than just one Tarmogoyf once we get to this top deck mode. So Fulminator Mage's in there to help against that. Huntmaster, just, hey, more creatures, gain some life. It's a threat, seems pretty good. Kind of a little bit more go wide strategy, if you will. Plague Engineer, dealing with those go wide strategies, kind of ties in nicely with our Maelstrom Pulse. You pick a creature type, and creature of the certain type gets -1/-1. So also 2/2 Death Touch. Nothing to sneeze at there. Collective Brutality, we've said it before, kind of that multi-mode, multi-faceted ability ties in again really well with Renin 6, because you can escalate, discard a card, discard a land. Well, I'll just get it back with Renin 6. Easy. More artifact removal, Leyline and Void, Graveyard Hate, Ashiok, Graveyard Hate, prevents people from searching. So one of the other relevant decks in the meta are those sort of scape shift lists. We've also got those primetime style decks, you know, Amulet Titan. So preventing them from searching to find things with their Summoner's Pact, with primetime, stuff like that, is actually pretty relevant. So I like the Ashiok thrown into the list on this one. So this is kind of the more tried and true. We're going to go a little bit quicker through these next 2 lists, but I just want you to pay attention to our numbers for creatures, planeswalkers, and spells. You'll see our spells are all very close, but we see those adjustments amongst creatures and planeswalkers here. So this time around, Dark Confidant has been added into the mix for this list. That is kind of more older school style. Some lists come and go with that. Now that Renin 6 is in, most people aren't running Dark Confidant because they are in the same slot, and you're limiting how many numbers you can have for certain converted mana costs based on this list. The other addition here, because we still have Skoos, we still have a Tyrus Tracker, but we are on that Bloodbraid Elf plan. Basically taking into account of, hey, he's a haste threat and I get a spell off of this. Most likely I'm going to be able to cast something of value, something of relevance at that moment in time, since everything in this list is going to be costing less than 4, right? Everything is 3 or less. The only downside with running all those is you're also running Dark Confidant. So being dinged for 4 is actually quite relevant. So just keep that in mind for those people that are looking at these numbers and stuff like that. But being able to have a 3/2 to swing in and be able to cast an Assassin's Trophy, a Push, a Kolaghan's Command, something else to go with it, or even another creature to follow up, another Planeswalker, just having that extra value is important, because some of the Jund lists, if they're not running Dark Confidant, if they're not running Bloodbraid Elf, it's harder, it gets to be longer, right? It is more grindy. So adding that into the mix can be very important. So some people that want that a little bit more speed, a little bit more burst in there, I would consider running those Bloodbraid Elves in your list. The other newer creatures that we've had to talk about would be our Plague Engineer in the main board. So we talked about him in the sideboard. Some lists are choosing to run him in the main board. And then our other one is Seasoned Pyromancer here. So let's pull up Seasoned Pyromancer a little bit bigger so everyone can see. Bam, 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 bam. All right. So Seasoned Pyromancer enters the battlefield, discard 2 cards. Okay, if you're sitting with 2 lands, because you can keep getting lands back with running 6, no big deal. But if you discard non-land spells, you get to create a 1/1 red elemental creature token this way. So, hey, I can discard irrelevant spells, I can discard irrelevant cards in general, and be able to get other stuff if I want. Right? Drawing 2 cards is nice, and being able to make guys is nice. So just sort of that cycle ability, if you're just like, well, I really need these spells, I don't really care about a 1/1 elemental right now, so that's fine. I'll be able to at least get access to 2 other cards and get rid of these 2 lands. And then the last bit of text is also relevant. If it gets super grindy and things have gone on and you're losing threats, you can be able to pay 5 mana and exile him from your graveyard to be able to create 2 1/1 red elemental creature tokens. So again, hey, things have gotten grindy. Let's do it, right? Let's go that extra mile. But you see now we're not running our Tyrus Tracker in this list, because we're going to be running Plague Engineer and Seasoned Pyromancer. Also running that Bloodbraid Elf in this, kind of that speed things along here. The sideboards are pretty similar across the board for what we've been seeing. This one is running Anissa in here, and running an additional Seasoned Pyromancer, but for the rest of it is pretty similar. Dampening Spheres in this list. Yeah, this one's still pretty much the same as the last couple ones. So pretty much consistency across the board. There are those couple of flex spots. Really, the creature base and our Planeswalker numbers are your flexibility spots. If you notice across the board, our spells have been pretty much the same, right? 18, 17, 17. Only difference here is that this list is not running a Maelstrom Pulse. Right? It feels like with 2 Plague Engineers in the main board, do I really need a Maelstrom Pulse? Because most likely I'm going to be killing off whatever it is with Plague Engineer. Right? Even if it's just that -1, that -1 to the toughness might be enough just to be able to hit it with a Bolt or a Kolaghan's Command just to finish it off. So that is very relevant when you're thinking about the way that this list runs. If you're looking for a mid-range strategy, something grindy, this is the way to go. It can have a hard time against Tron in particular because of, hey, we're both grinding, but you have bigger threats. Some combo decks, just the speed at which they can go off, if you have kind of the wrong sort of disruption removal, it can be harder, but for the most part, anything creature-based strategy, not much of a big deal. You can be able to ding them off, kill them off, no problem. It is one of those decks that is pretty much 50% against most of the meta. There's a plus or minus in there for very specific matchups, but it's not something that has a lot of weaknesses. It's one of those that is pretty much good or decent, I guess you can say, against most of the meta, and that's why it does well. Now, if things get too convoluted and too fast, that's when we start to see Jund kind of fall off out of the meta. All right, it just can't keep up with the speed at which some people are dying in Modern, right? Oh, here, boom, turn 3, you're dead. Well, I guess I'm dead, right? If you're tapping out to play a Planeswalker and it doesn't keep you alive the next turn and they just kill you, that's sometimes how it goes. So that's why Jund kind of ebbs and flows, but it is something that always exists in Modern, so definitely something worth talking about in our 2019 meta. But that's it for this episode, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was a little bit quicker this time around because it's an older deck. We've talked about it before on previous episodes. Back in at least 2017, we talked about it. I don't think it was much relevant in 2018, or at least not as relevant, so we didn't discuss it as much, but 2019, it's coming back. A big part of that is some of our new cards that we were talking about here. Renin 6 in particular is one of those big ones. So if you guys like this episode and like what I'm doing here, please consider following, subscribing, all that kind of good stuff. All the links for where you can check me out, you can see up in the corner up there. You can also be able to check in the description below for more information about me and what I'm working on. There are going to be more episodes coming out soon for Modern Meta, if I can speak, Modern Meta Breakdown, and then we will be doing, of course, other content, Sea of Thieves, and other videos for you guys to be able to enjoy. But again, that's going to do it for us here tonight, guys. Thanks for tuning in and watching, and I'll catch you guys next game.